Well, it's always a pleasure and an honor to be asked to preach here among friends. One thing that I do periodically when I do this is to come down here because first, I think it reminds me of coaching, of my coaching days when I was giving a pregame talk or something. So if you feel an unnatural urge to go kick a soccer ball when you leave here, then maybe I've done my job. But also, for me, when I'm up there, I have a tendency, because I'm taller, to look down, and you're looking at the top of my head the whole time. So this helps for me to make eye contact with you. Pastor Carolyn has been taking us this summer on a road trip, a series of road trips, where on each of those journeys, we meet some of the characters, particularly of the Old Testament so far. And like any good road trip, any good journey, one thing they do is to take us out of our comfort zone. This is one of God's favorite things, I think, at least to do with me, is to take me out of my comfort zone. Because when we come out of our comfort zone, oftentimes this is when and how we grow. Well, today's reading takes everybody way out of their comfort zone, okay? It's almost an understatement to say that this reading takes us out of our comfort zone. Abraham is definitely taken out of his comfort zone when he's asked to sacrifice the son that he's waited so long for. Isaac is taken out of his comfort zone when he realizes that there is no lamb for the burnt offering, and it's just him and his dad, and who's left? And then we're taken way out of our comfort zone. The idea that the God that we worship would even consider such a thing as child sacrifice is just incomprehensible to us. Now, as shocking and disturbing as this story is, what I'd like to do is talk you through a couple of things that may help to make some sense out of this story. The first thing to communicate is, I think it's supposed to be shocking. I think it is meant to shock us, okay? It is meant to catch the reader's attention. Secondly, and we'll go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here to make this make sense. When we watch a good movie, a suspenseful movie, let's say, oftentimes we are alerted that something important is getting ready to happen. And usually that alert is given by the music. That was perfect, Claire. So, for those of you at least my age, you may have just had a little bit of a PTSD flashback to the movie Jaws. In the movie Jaws, those two notes alert the viewer that there's getting ready to be a shark attack. And as you get further and further into the movie and closer to the climax of the movie, what happens, Claire? Excellent. So the movie, or the music in the movie, tells you that something important's getting ready to happen, something even more important's getting ready to happen, and oh my gosh, the most important thing is getting ready to happen. Well, I don't expect you to take my word for this immediately, But the Bible does this, especially in the Old Testament, in Genesis and Exodus. The Bible does this with wood and trees. When wood and trees show up, it alerts the reader that something important is getting ready to happen. Okay? So, a couple of examples of that. The first living thing that God creates in the creation story is a tree, a fruit-bearing tree. The next big story after the creation story is Adam and Eve and the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, interestingly, after Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit and are exiled from Eden, no trees, no wood shows up in the biblical narrative until Noah builds an ark out of wood. Now, it's a sermon for another day, but the trees and the wood are connected to Eden. All right? So when the trees and the wood show up, there's supposed to be something with the connection to Eden that's supposed to click. In the Exodus story, every time something important happens, Moses' staff is involved, which they make a point of letting you know that that's made of wood. So if there's a plague, if the Red Sea gets parted, if there's a battle that the Israelites are winning, the staff, Moses' staff, will be there. Something important is getting ready to happen. And just a little tidbit to help you understand, it is wood or trees because in Hebrew there's no distinction. To us, wood is what's been removed from the tree. But in their language, it's all the word eitz. Eitz is both a tree and the wood that comes from the tree. So there's no distinction for them between a tree and wood. All right. Now, with that in mind, let's go back and read a little bit of the reading from today. First, I'm actually going to go just before our reading started. We started at the beginning of chapter 22. This is the last two verses of chapter 21. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba. And there he called on the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. So, something big's getting ready to happen. He planted a tree. Now I'm going to start with our reading back at verse 3. Watch this. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Now remember about the speeding up of the bums as it gets close to the climax. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. And he himself carried the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. So, bum, 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 bum. This is something really big is getting ready to happen. So we've reached the climax of the entire Abraham narrative. This story, one of the reasons it's shocking is we are joining the movie as the shark attacks the boat. We didn't see everything that has led up to this point, okay? So it is the climax of 11 chapters of getting to know Abraham and his relationship with God. So we are coming right in with our reading at that point. It's still shocking, but it's been building to this for 11 chapters. And this is Abraham's final exam. And thank goodness, because I'm not sure we could take anything more intense than what is given to us here. There's a Jewish theologian, Aaron Kohler, who says we cannot understand this story without putting it side by side with the story Carolyn gave us last week of when Hagar and Ishmael are banished into the desert by Abraham and Sarah. And as you look at it, the parallels in these two stories are uncanny. They both involve Abraham giving up a son. Both stories begin with the phrase, early in the morning. Abraham puts supplies on Hagar's back. He puts wood on Isaac's back. Both Hagar and Abraham are called to by an angel of the Lord just before the child dies. God provides the thing that saves each of the children. In Ishmael and Hagar's case, he provides a well. In Abraham and Isaac's case, he provides the ram. But Kohler says the similarities are there in order to accentuate and magnify where the two stories differ. That what's important is how do these stories compare and contrast what's different in the Abraham and Isaac story. And the biggest difference comes that Hagar, when she knows that they're in trouble, puts Ishmael under a bush and goes, as Carolyn was talking about, a bow shot away. Because, understandably, she can't bear to see the boy die. At the pivotal moment of the Abraham and Isaac story, though, right after Isaac asks the question about where the lamb is, Abraham confidently, it seems, answers, "The Lord himself will provide the lamb." And then it emphasizes that they walked on together. As if to say, from Abraham's standpoint, I'm not sure what's getting ready to happen here, but we're going to go together through this. We're going to experience this together. Now, this is not in any way to make Hagar look bad. Hagar's a victim. Hagar and Ishmael are the outcasts. They have been abused and taken advantage of. All right, so in no way is this in any way making Hagar look bad. Abraham is the patriarch of God's chosen people. His bar needs to be set really high. To whom much is given, much is expected. And so this ultimate test for Abraham is because God is counting on him to be that father figure, that patriarch for an entire nation of his chosen people. And so that is one reason, I think, why such an extreme thing would be done as a test. And what we see is that Abraham, by saying the Lord will provide the lamb, has learned to trust God even when he doesn't know exactly how things are going to go. He answers, when God says Abraham, he answers with the phrase, "Here I am." There are only 9 times in the Bible where that phrase is used, and they're all at really important times. Moses says it at the burning bush. "Here I am," which actually is the word Hanani. Hanani in Hebrew means more than just over here. It means, I'm at your service. It is what you would say, what a servant might say to their master. "Here I am," Hanani. So Abraham answers God, "Hanani, at your service." But then he answers Isaac the same way. Isaac says, "Father?" And Abraham answers, "Hanani, at your service." So Abraham is totally devoted to trusting God and totally devoted to Isaac. That phrase, "Here I am," I said 9 times it's used. 3 of them are in this chapter. So a third of all the times that it's used are in this chapter. We've watched Abraham grow over the last 11 chapters, and with some of the stories that Carolyn has told. See, Abraham would have been what my dear mother would have called a wheeler-dealer. It was a phrase she liked to use. And when she used it, it meant someone who couldn't be trusted. Abraham would have made a great used camel salesman. Everything Abraham does, it seems like he's trying to work an angle. God sends him to Egypt, and he makes up this story about how Sarah is his sister, presumably so that they won't kill him because the Egyptians want to marry Sarah. He actually bargains with God one time. Now, if there's one person in Sodom that's worth saving, will you save them? Well, what about if there's 10? Abraham is a bargainer. He likes to wheel and deal. So, God has had to work on his character. God has had to make Abraham more trustworthy while he's teaching Abraham that he can trust God. Now, one problem that we have, I think, with Old Testament stories is that for those of us, Christians, post-Jesus, post-crucifixion and resurrection, we don't always know what to make of these Old Testament stories. They're good stories, they're interesting, parting the Red Sea, 10 Commandments, but how do we relate them to our lives after the gospel? Well, we talked about the parallels between the Ishmael story and the Isaac story. But there's actually another parallel story in the New Testament where a father's called on to sacrifice his son. his only son, the one whom he loves. And that's the crucifixion. See, both Jesus and Isaac were born under miraculous circumstances. Isaac carries wood on his back. So does Jesus carry a wooden cross. Both of them carrying the tools of their own executions. Neither Jesus nor Isaac resist. Both of them submit to the situation that they're in. The two servants traveling with Abraham parallel the two criminals that were crucified with Jesus. I don't know if you caught it or not, but verse 4 in our reading starts with the phrase, "on the third day." Wow. And finally, and this is the one that really gets me, when the ram shows up, his horns are caught in the thicket. The ram has thorns on its head. Now, there's a lot of ways to interpret those parallels and those similarities and make of that what you wish, but I'd like to suggest that one of the things that parallel does, at least it does for me, is it desanitizes the cross. See, we use the cross for decoration. It's beautiful, and I wouldn't change that for anything. That's not my point here. But I do think it's important for us to remember periodically what the cross meant at that time. It's a hangman's noose. It's a lethal injection. With this story, for some reason, we're appalled at God asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. Are we just as appalled that God the Father had to sacrifice his son? I think that's one of the things it does for me, is it makes it real again. We have a God, we worship a God who has feelings. We know that he gets angry, that he experiences joy, that he has love. Wow. What he must have been feeling to know that he was giving his son over to be crucified. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomever should believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Through all three of these parallel stories that we talk about today, we learn, as Abraham did, that our God is one that we can trust in every way to provide for us, even to the point of allowing his son to go to the cross. Amen.